What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Welcome back. It's been an interesting week. Had a lot of great guests. We've got about 3 guests today. My first guest today will be John Light. He's a really interesting gentleman. He started as an accountant and then pivoted into recruiting and never looked back. He is the president and founder of Sabretooth. How you doing today, John?
Good morning, Sonny. Doing great, man. Doing great. Hopefully, we're going to talk about something interesting today, too.
No, not today. I was planning to maybe not. No, I'm kidding. So you do something quite interesting. Tell us, maybe just like jump right into the deep end. What is Sabretooth? What are you building? And we'll keep it high level for now, but we'll kind of go deep into it later on in the interview as well.
No, happy to. And I appreciate the question. And I'd like to preface the answer, if I can, with just a touch of history. I've been in every corner of the recruitment industry, if you will. I've managed RPOs. I've driven retail staffing. I started actually in retained search early on. And I've spent a lot of time in the contingent permanent placement world. Being around all those areas, my thesis coming into Sabretooth is there's this vast underserved part of the market. And just to generalize it, people making 120, 150,000 base salary up to about 300, 350. That space isn't very well served by the big retained firms. It's not well served by the contingent firms either. And so my thesis coming in with Sabretooth is, hey, how do we better serve, make hiring more efficient, more accurate, more reliable in that space? And to do that, we came to market with what we call the retention model, which we try to take the service levels and success rate of retained and blend it with the speed and cost of contingent. That model, in the 3.5 years we've had it deployed, we've been sporting just over a 95% plus fill rate and a 96 plus percent stick rate, i.e., people staying, being there at least a year after we placed them. And insofar it's within their control. Of course, we can't control for stuff like mergers and acquisitions and divestitures and that sort of thing. But by and large, it's been robust and delivered on what I wanted to deliver when I first came in and decided to do something different.
Fascinating. So I guess, before we kind of go into the core part of the interview here, more humans, not less. What is this overall thesis? I gotta admit, it's
It-
contrarian, which I like.
yeah, I mean, it is a little contrarian, and because everybody seems to think that AI is going to take over the world, and AI is an incredibly powerful tool. I mean, there's no doubt, but its best application isn't taking over the world, hopefully. Its best application is how can it help us be better at what we are as human beings? And, I noticed this when I did audit back in my accounting days. Man, it was boring. You're sitting around waiting for PBCs, you're footing and cross footing. It's just boring as a day is long. Well, as far as I'm concerned, let a machine do it. They're better at math than we are anyway, arithmetic and accuracy, so on and so forth. But when it comes to making decisions, I think it's very critical that those decisions are made by a human being, because AI's got a long way to catch up. AI doesn't learn the way we learn. It tries to mimic on a probabilistic basis how we think and what we'd say. But let me give you this example. If little Johnny goes into his mama's kitchen when and reaches up and grabs a hot pan and burns his hand, odds are very good little Johnny's never going to do that again. In fact, if he comes in and he wants to reach up and see what's on the stove, he might feel first. He might get close, but he's just not going to reach up and grab it. There's a negative consequence to his decision. There are no negative consequences for AI for its decision or the answer it gives you. None. So the risk reward calculation in presenting an answer on a probabilistic basis is warped. It's not the same one that you and I use. If you and I make an investment, we start a company, we do whatever it is, we're sacrificing something else, and we recognize that cost. We recognize the opportunity cost. We recognize the risk in a way that AI cannot, because it's not trained. It doesn't learn that way. And I believe it's as AI moves forward and promulgates, the bottlenecks to productivity and to success eventually will not be infrastructure, it won't be compute cycles, it won't be your algos. It'll be people, because people do business with people. People hire people. And I believe, and I think we see it happening in the market right now, we're going to be moving away. We are moving away from function centric jobs into jobs that are judgment centric. Your ability to make a decision drawing on all of your experience set and your career and your life and your background. AI brings you to that point. It gets you to the 5-yard line. You decide what you're willing to do to get into the end zone. And that's a game changer, I think, when companies start recognizing that versus trying just to hodgepodge replace people. Yeah, there are functions that are going to be replaced, but at the end of the day, your biggest limiting factor is going to end up being people. And therefore, it's important to recognize that however AI can help release us from the mundane, release us from the heavy lifts that we used to have to do manually in Excel or some other database, and allow us to be more human. That's where things get interesting. And that's also why in our recruitment process, we don't run ads. We don't have job ads anywhere. You can search us up. You won't see anything. Instead, we developed our own AI tool on our own greenfield at our own data set, to where we find out who's best aligned on a hard skill basis. And we don't care if they're looking or not. We're going to reach out directly to them and have a person-to-person conversation, because interest drives availability. And there's always something left out in an email. You may not have time to take that email, read it, and digest it, but statistically, 87% of the time, someone's willing to pick up the phone and talk to a recruiter who's got a job or an opportunity that aligns with their background and looks like a probable next best step in their career. 87% of the time, Sonny. You can't get that kind of response rate running an ad. You can't get that kind of response rate sending emails. You got to engage person to person.
Yeah, I like that. Yes, AI makes you more human. It's counterintuitive, but I believe it. I mean, I experience it, I feel like, in my day to day as well, right?
Well, how much more human do you feel being able to talk to your AI assistant versus having to type everything out, versus having to do this or that? And you can just turn around and say, hey, we need to make a note. It's
true.
and Alexa was kind of on the front end of that, Alexa and Siri.
So,
but it's
not
getting
only
to
is
where
my interaction with AI is becoming more human-esque, but it also, I guess, with the deeper point to your point I was trying to make is that because the AI is now able to do a lot of the execution work that I used to be responsible for, I can focus more on relationship building, on connecting,
Yep.
on doing a live stream, or talking to people, right? And that's something that, again, I could be wrong. I mean, I keep getting, I didn't see that the AI would definitely come as far as it even has, right? This is quite remarkable. But I still don't see how we, like, things like sales, business development, like I feel like there's a role there for people. Like, ultimately, people aren't going to buy, $100,000 products from, B2B just based on some like AI conversation.
Well, and if you go out too, you'll find mistakes made by AI constantly.
Sure.
And there's no recovery. Eliminating data sets and complete databases getting wiped out. And, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Even though you told me not to do it, I did it anyway. And there's just so much of a learning curve still out there. And the more we release it to do, the more mistakes we're going to see. And of course, the Silicon Valley mindset, and I don't disagree with it at all, is we need to fail faster and learn faster so we can grow faster. At the same time, I believe firmly that the better we enable people to be, the better we can be. Right now, we're limited. Our productivity is limited. But companies have been firing and laying off large swaths of people. They're coming back and finding, wait a second, without the people, we can't actually make the decisions necessary to take advantage of the productivity improvements that are coming with the technology. So, I mean, Ford just posted an article in Ford just a couple, 3 weeks ago. They had to go back and rehire 350 senior engineers that they had fired to replace with AI. Well, why did they do that? Because obviously there's a bottleneck. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of detail. There's just so much stuff. So again, I believe the biggest bottleneck is going to be, can you get human to human connection going? Can you build those relationships? To your point, Sonny, can I be more of what I am
Mm.
rather than what I'm forced to try and be more of what I am, if that
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense
yeah,
to you.
yeah. Oh no, no, that totally makes sense. So I guess John, take me back before all this work you're doing now with recruitment and executive search. You started in accounting, like you mentioned, and
Yeah.
audit before recruiting. So take me back. What did a young John like think he was going to be, and like what was the pull towards like numbers in the first place?
Man, that's the way back machine. Uh, I even thought I was going to keep my hair back then, but I was wrong. It's a joke only us insiders can really get, right, and
Yeah,
appreciate, I
you and I
suppose.
both.
But when I got my accounting degree, I think a large part of my thought process was, oh man, I want to understand how businesses work. And accounting is a great place to see that because that's what you're doing is you're using numbers to paint a picture of the financial results or the operational results of a company at a point in time or over a period of time. And when I left college, I left Texas A&M, graduated, I went to work uh, on the industry side, not in the audit side. And about a year and a half later, 2 years later, I left and went to USA Waste and we merged with Waste Management. And I tell you, that was one of the best jobs of my career. It was fantastic because I got to get involved in everything. I got to make decisions. I got to get engaged in sales and I got to get engaged in operations and maintenance. And I was responsible. Our business model was I had basically everything except federal tax and treasury was pushed down at the company level where I sat, the district level. Um, Life changes happened. I ended up getting into audit and public accounting. It totally drained me, man. It was like you're a zombie. Yeah, there's the technical aspect to it, and that's fine. But just actually doing the work, not being able to engage, seeing a solution or a potential problem, and it's not related to the scope of work, so there's nothing you can really do about it, drove me nuts. And then I just kind of accidentally, I took a personality test for somebody who was taking a chance on me and kind of stumbled into the recruitment industry by accident, which I think is a story of a lot of people. There's not a lot of people looking, or there used not to be. I'm going to go be, talent acquisition professional. That's just not. You don't see that written on somebody's refrigerator when they're in the third grade.
That's funny. So you cut your teeth in Houston's energy sector. So I guess what did
Yes.
recruiting inside energy, a hard relationship heavy kind of cyclical industry drill into that shape, how you operate
Yeah.
today?
Yeah. No, happy to because I think the energy industry as a whole, and I'm not just talking hydrocarbons. I'm talking the holistic power generation, whether that's spinning turbines with gas or making hydroelectric power or windmills or solar, whatever it might be, all the way down through you going and getting gas at the pump at your local gas station. It's an incredibly diverse and deep industry. The amount of technology that's wrapped into that industry is mind-boggling. In fact, I separate IT software, if I can put it that way, not software, but hardware piece of things. Your desktop managers, your people who manage your servers, and all. I separate that from what I call tech. Tech, we're talking AI, we're talking machine learning, we're talking deep learning, we're talking NLP, we're all this stuff. My first, what I call tech role that I did that was a pure play tech role was in the energy industry, a retail power company in 2017, where they needed a head of marketing analytics. It was a retained search, massive company. And I was told, you're not going to find the person we need who had Python and built dashboards and did all this other fun stuff in the Houston area. You're probably going to find them out on the West Coast, or you might find them over in New York or someplace like that. All my finalists were in the Houston area, all four. And they asked me, they said, well, where did you go to get them? Because I don't run ads. I don't do any of that other stuff. I haven't for years. And this is at a prior company where it's just me as basically a solopreneur. And I said, well, I went out and found everywhere that people were doing webinars and seminars and conferences related to Python and machine learning, data science. I pulled their speaker list, and where I could, I pulled their guest list. And I just went down those lists. And it was really funny. They looked at me like, "You did what?" Yeah, I did the human piece of it, man. I went out and I got referrals and I daisy chained and I did the work that came with it. Now I can do so much of that with AI, either in our tool or you can use Perplexity or Claude or Grok or whatever, and you can make these lists pretty quickly. But someone still has to do the grind of having the conversations. And what was amazing to me is when I paused on the back end of it and looked at it and said, "Wow, the technology that goes into this, where else is it in industry? It's everywhere, man." I talked to a fellow a few years ago, back when the major downturn, I think it was during when COVID hit, it might have been a little bit before. Schlumberger, major oilfield services company, I think it's the biggest one in the world. And this guy, this executive, credited their machine learning team, their data science team, which grew quickly from a handful of people to 150 plus in a year or two, credited them with saving the company because they were able to take that data, crunch it, and assess, okay, here's where we've got more opportunity. Here's where we're getting shellacked. Here's what we could do. Here are the options to improve these things, where we could redeploy capital, which took me right back to that placement of the head of marketing analytics. This guy built these dashboards, these amazing dashboards, and controlled an $80 million a year direct ad budget from that dashboard, almost down to the minute. Where are we getting the best responses? Where are we the most profitable? Where are all these things? It could literally control, like, this is hot right now, let's feed into it. This is cooling off, so let's reallocate. I mean, it's just remarkable. And when you look at the energy business as a whole, the involvement in technology, those are just two minor examples, is through the roof. I would recommend anybody interested in energy. I believe it's usually in May, April, May timeframe in Houston. There is a conference called the OTC, Offshore Technology Conference. And whether you like the hydrocarbon business or not, upstream, midstream, downstream, if you go to this conference and you go through the George R. Brown Convention Center, it is technology front to back. It's everything you could imagine, machine learning and AI, yeah, but all the way into the hard sciences. I mean, man, there was time a couple decades ago when I placed metallurgists. You had to have a PhD, had to be in metallurgy. And you know what you were doing? You were selling used drill pipe, and you're making, back in the early 2000s, 200, 300K a year doing that. It was almost a part-time job for some of those guys that are making ridiculous money. Well, the technology aspect of it is through the roof. And that's allowed me to spin off with Sabretooth into other areas. I've done a lot of fintech. I've done a lot of course, in the energy space. We've gotten involved a little bit in health tech. I'm actually talking to some folks right now in other spaces that are of interest, because as we look at AI and we talk about these different industry segments, I think the lines are starting to blur a little bit. And I think ultimately that's part of what Elon Musk has in mind. He has this vision of one app that kind of rules your world. X, where you're going to communicate, you're going to get your entertainment, you're going to get your news, you're going to get your tribe, you're going to get whatever. Oh yeah, and it's also going to be your assistant, and it's going to do this and do that, and it'll all be right there on one app, if you will. I think there's going to be a lot of bleed over where we start losing some of the stark lines between industry segments because of the technology and what it's doing as well.
Interesting. So I guess before we get to Sabretooth, like, who or what shaped, the way you think about people and matching, like mentors, a client, a hard lesson, like that still kind of sits in the back of your mind?
Man, if we're going to talk about hard lessons, I would be here all day. We've had a lot. And if you're in this industry, you get a lot, whether you recognize them or not. But when I started working with a guy years ago named Mike Charbonnier, he was in retained search, and the man was brilliant. just knew what he was doing. In fact, he was so good and so well versed and trained. He could sit down and talk with you, and in about, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, he could give you your IQ within 5 points. I mean, I was like, I'd never run across anybody doing that, right? And Mike taught me how to interview people, and it's really influenced how I interview today. And funny enough, there's a book, I've got it in my library, called Top Grading, written by a guy named Bradford Smart. It's parallel, very, very similar to how Mike taught me to go about things. But when so many people focus on, oh, you've got to have X number of years doing this and show expertise in this and that, I agree. All that's very important. I also believe that when you look at a candidate, we really need to focus on integrity, intellect, and initiative. Those three things to me are more important than just about anything else. And I'll tell you why. Integrity, take honesty out of your mind for a second and don't worry about that. Integrity is really about consistency. You are what you say you are. Okay. And you have this consistency about you in everything you do. The person who shows up for the interview is the same person I see on paper and then I see on LinkedIn or wherever it might be. Intellect, notice I didn't say IQ or intelligence. I kind of differentiate. What I'm really looking for, the big flag for me is, do they have intellectual curiosity? Are they driven to know more? Are they driven to learn? Do they ask questions? As a candidate, go and ask me questions that maybe I can't answer because I'm not the client, right? But can I see where they're going? What's the logic behind it? Does it make sense? Or are they sitting there asking stuff that's just rote? If you got a guy or a gal you're talking to and they are asking you really deep questions, really thoughtful questions, and they're clearly coming because of what you said earlier or what you two discussed earlier in the conversation, you're on to something. It doesn't matter to me if their IQ is X, Y, or Z. What matters to me is, are they curious and hungry to learn? Show me that. That's your intellect. Because if you can talk to someone or investigate something and not want to learn more, there's a problem. And then the third piece of that is initiative. I don't really care if you're an AP clerk or a CEO. If you're not willing to see that there's a problem or an issue that needs to be dealt with and then go deal with it, then you're probably not the right person for one of my clients. And I think maybe the worst thing we could ever do, Sonny, is hire somebody who has a lot of red flags on the integrity piece, the consistency piece, but they're very bright, high intellect, and they have a lot of initiative. Because that's where you end up with somebody who's got too much time on their hand and will make trouble. There's a balance there that has to be struck, but that first piece is integrity. And yeah, all the hard skills are there. If you need a CPA, then you need a CPA. You need a PE, then you need a PE. You need an MD, then you need an MD, and whatever specialization. But at the end of the day, I want to hire people, ideally, whether it's for me or for my clients, I want to bring people that are greenlit on integrity, intellect, and initiative. And that's one of the big lessons I learned from Mike is it's so much more than whether or not you can design a bridge or code software or whatever it might be.
And then I guess at some point you stopped selling, other people's models and then decided, the whole thing was broken in the middle, right? So when did that gap in the market first become obvious to you, John?
I couldn't put an exact date on it, but I would guess it was about 15 years ago. I'd been in the industry for a while, and I'd trained and developed quite a few people. Been very successful in my own right, mostly in the contingent space. At the same time, I noticed that the further up the food chain you went with contingent, the harder it got. And let me explain that. You had to go so much deeper to really know your candidates and what the job was from the client side, the context and everything. If you're placing 80 and 100K people, you don't have to dive as deep. The problem with contingent is that statistically across all categories, they fill about 15% of the job orders they get. So 85% of the time they're working for free effectively. So you don't have time because you got to chase a transaction. You don't have the time, energy, resources to really put into getting to know people and opportunities, companies very, very, very well. Some do. Those are exceptions. With retained, You do those things, you have a longer cycle for fulfillment. You also have these big milestone payments. So they typically charge a third of the first year's guaranteed cash compensation, third retained up front, a third delivery in a short list, a third either at the start or end of interviews and hiring decisions made, whatever. Some even do it on deferred comp, which gets kind of hairy to follow. But if you try to go below the C suite and you start stepping down further and further, it just becomes prohibitively expensive and it takes too much time typically. So I saw this opportunity here in the middle where, man, this is really underserved. And if I could find a way to better place those directors and those VPs, those senior managers, those high level individual contributors, then I think my thought was we'd be on to something. And that's the thesis that led me to the retingent idea and forward from there. But it's been bubbling in the background for a while. But in the meantime, I had, some life changes that happened. After a 5-year fight, I lost my first wife to cancer. I was a primary caregiver to that, and just struggled with 3 kids, and it was a horrible time and a terrible challenge. But coming out of the COVID lockdowns and coming out of what was an insane time in the talent acquisition industry to where we are today, look, I think we're on the right track. Let me put it that way in terms of where things are going. And, what we really need at this point, I think, are companies to start coming around, much like someone at Ford finally did and said, hey, we need to eat some crow. We can spend it however we want, but we got to rehire 350 senior engineers we let go to replace with AI. Why? Why do you have to do that? Because they're trying to use AI in a way that it's not meant to do. It's a system, good in, good out, garbage in, garbage out. It's got to be trained. It's got to be developed. It's got to kind of grow with you. And you need people to provide that, among other things. So I know it's a little long-winded, but hopefully it gets the point there.
Yeah, for sure. So can you walk me through the insight behind retingent? Like what did you see about, that like that 150K to 300K range, that the contingent and retained worlds were both missing?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, on the contingent world, starting there, you got a lower fill rate. And even if that fill rate bumps up into the 20% range, it's still really anemic. So companies, suppose you had to hire a $200,000 a year director or a vice president, whatever the title might be of whatever space. Companies will often engage multiple contingent firms. So they're managing multiple resource lines, multiple throats to choke, if we can put it that way, points of accountability. And none of them are particularly likely, have a high likelihood of delivery. On the recruitment side, on the contingent firm side, they recognize that. So how much time are they willing to put into a search of that nature? Typically, what I've seen, you get about 3 weeks. They're going to hit their database. They're going to post basically the same ad that you posted as a company and hope they can collect someone before you do and present them so that they would be in line for the transaction. So there's not a lot of time for vetting and understanding that person and so on and so forth. Retained, on the other hand, does take their sweet time getting to know people, developing briefs on them and so on and so forth. But it gets cost prohibitive. I mean, if you're paying a third of 200 grand, you're somewhere in the 60K plus range. And guess what? If you decide to delay that hire, if you decide not to fill that role, retained typically continues to bill because it's how the contract is written. Oh yeah, we'll still do this 6 months from now, but if for some reason your strategy changed, you don't need that role anymore for whatever reason, you're still on the hook for the fee. Contingent, everybody goes, oh crud, where there, it's free, it doesn't cost us anything unless we hire someone. Well, but it also means you get a much lower service level on average. And so retingent, we wanted to bring the speed and the hustle factor consistently over time that you see in contingent. We didn't want to bring the cost forward as it relates to retain, but we wanted to bring more of the service levels forward to match them up with that speed, right? And so retingent, we charge a pretty standard contingent total fee. We get a retainer, a third of that on the front end, and nothing else until we have a signed offer letter. What that does is it changes the relationship dynamic. Now everybody's got skin in the game. because we don't take that retainer and like invest it in land or a building or something like that. We're actually spending that on the search, on data that we need, new avenues we need to find people as needed, and so on and so forth. And we go after it hammer and tongs. It's a big difference because we're not chasing the transaction now. We're chasing delivery, more analogous to retained than contingent. But because it's a lower fee than retained and time matters to us, we don't want to fill this role 6 months down the road. We want to fill it within 90 days. Last year, we averaged 47 from kickoff to signed offer letter. So that gives you an idea, the whole idea of the thesis, if you will, the underpinning for everything we do in retingent is how can we be more efficient to market instead of just relying on the same old process everybody's always used. Because, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant, Sonny, I apologize ahead of time, but I think it's important that people realize this. The vast majority of AI applications we see in the marketplace, in talent acquisition especially, and there are a lot of other spaces, they're taking the same process that we developed and were using in the 1980s, wrapping technology around it, and they're going, wow, we can move so much faster and do so much more. All you've managed really to do is industrialize inefficiency. This is a generational opportunity to improve your processes, to do things better. Let AI do the stuff that people don't do especially well or struggle with, and then turn around and have people doing more people things, because that's going to be the biggest bottleneck to success for us, for you, for any company out there in the coming years.
Interesting. So, John, another thing I was going to ask you about was a 95% fill rate against a 15 to 20% industry average is the kind of number that makes people lean in, right? So when did you first realize your approach was essentially producing outcomes that that far off the curve?
Yeah, well, it's not far off the curve as it is if you compare it to retained search, where I've seen rates going from the high 80s into the mid 90s. It is way off the curve as compared to contingent. And, that's part of what got me there. Asking a client statistically to put some skin in the game, some money up front. I did that years ago. We used to call an engaged search at another firm. And I noticed on those roles, we typically place, 50, 60% of those versus 15 to 20. But we're talking $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 retainers. We're not talking a lot. So from a company perspective, a big company that's not a big number to them. But when you start talking a third of, say, a $45,000 total fee, they're putting $15,000 into it. It's a little bit of a change of perspective. And what it encourages, what companies I think need to lean into, and so do people on my side of the desk, lean into actually pursuing delivery. How do I get you the right talent at the right time? How do I put that right person in front of you versus how do I put a person you're going to want to interview in front of you so I get credit if they get hired? And so it's a very vast mentality mindset shift. And I think that it makes a lot more sense to partner with a company than for a company just to go around and shotgun job descriptions out, ads, contingent firms, and pray and hope, that the right person swims in it. I guess the analogy I've used, think about a net in the water and you're trying to catch fish, right? And there's a particular fish you want, and you may or may not get it, but you're going to put that net in and you're going to check it regularly and you're going to hope and pray the right fish swims into it. Versus what we do, we go spearfishing. I find out where that fish lives and I go into their living room and talk to them. The candidate, I spear the fish, I talk to the candidate. There's a difference between the two. We don't want to shoot any candidates. And so I think that's that mindset shift is a big part of what needs to happen and is what has driven how we approach business today.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. Cool. So you built Sabretooth on your own, like kind of greenfield data set, right? Instead of wrapping an existing tool. What was the
Right.
moment you decided you had to like, kind of own that data layer yourself? And why did that matter so much to you?
Man, that's a really good question because we developed a white paper on it, and 2 or 3 years ago, people were talking about agentic AI, or excuse me, generative AI, and where ChatGPT was all the rage, and people were like, "Oh man, we can just go search the entire web and bring everything to ourselves." And there are a lot of misconceptions, misunderstanding of how the technology functions and operates. And one of the things that I learned dealing with people and placing people into the machine learning space, and it applies to AI in general. AI, these systems love structured data. They can digest it easily, they can process it and deal with it. Unstructured data requires more compute cycles, more tokens, more this, more that. So the original thought process was, man, if we could greenfield our own data, pre-process it, curate it, enrich it in a way that was best for what we do, we could have a massive advantage. And that's actually where most of the spend has been, is in the data set. And we don't have it for the entire talent market in the US yet. We're not far off, but the segments we have it in, if I get a job from you and we do the intake, I can usually have the entire talent market in the segments we have mapped in 10 or 15 minutes based on hard skills. I can see who's most likely to be most aligned with what your needs are. And then I can take that top tranche and go attack. I can go reach out, talk with them, have the conversations. And in fact, I did a search in New Jersey not long ago, which is a long way from Texas, Sonny, let me tell you, but it was in New Jersey. And they needed a director of accounting with a very specific background skill set. And I used our tool. I went in there. I actually, in the tranche of people I pulled from it, the candidate I placed there was in that group. I think he was the number 3 or 4th ranked candidate in there. And as I went down that group, he wasn't looking. There was no open to work banner on his LinkedIn profile, but we had a conversation. And like I mentioned earlier, interest drives availability. Where he was at, he was comfortable, but he was never going to be the CFO, at least not in the near term. Where I placed him, I imagine he's a CFO in 2 or 3 years at the most. Natural progression. And the guy's a rock star. He made total sense. But by aligning the hard, measurable skills first, scoring them, understanding who was going to make the most sense in that regard, I started at the top of the list and worked my way through it. And somewhere in there, you're going to find the right people. And that may be 10 calls, that may be 100. Doesn't matter. You work the process. You work the process the right way. Enough times, you get the right results.
Most people in hiring are racing to automate the human out of it, right? So
Mhm.
you landed on the opposite conviction, more human to human contact, not less. So
Right.
what experience pushed you there?
Um, I don't know that. I mean, it's probably an amalgamation of experiences, Sonny. But I'd say one of the things that crystallized it for me is I was reading a blog, and it were these executives who had declined to pursue opportunities because the first step was interviewing with an AI bot. And they're like, don't, if this isn't important enough for you to call me or me to call you or me to come to your offices or whatever it might be, and you're going to assign a bot to do it, I'm not going to waste my time with you. And it kind of drove home for me that, and I borrowed this from someone, heaven help me, I can't remember exactly where, but people hire people. People do business with people. And are there going to be times when when we automate purchasing and supply chain? Absolutely. Within very tight parameters. But guess what? It's still going to be monitored and overseen by people. And the final decision still has to have a signature on it from your chief legal officer, your VP of supply chain, or whoever it might be. And so there's I think, a need for us to do the things that we have not yet figured out how to build into technology. consciousness, ethics. Yeah, we can put stuff in there, but AI, because it's, especially agentic AI, because it's probabilistic and it's trained to continue pushing for answers, it's going to keep serving answers up because there's no risk to itself. You bear all the risk. It's kind of like this. You go to a restaurant, Sonny, and you order a nice steak. You get your strip, you get your ribeye, you get your whatever, and you say, I want it medium. And it comes out, and that animal is still moving on your plate, man. It's so fresh. It's almost raw. You're like, no, I got to send it back. The chef in there gets a little miffed, and man, they put the flame on it and they send it back to you. And now it's so well done, it's like boot leather and you can't eat it. So you send it back again. Finally, the third time, they acquiesce, they get it right, they get you the steak. At the end of the night, what is on your ticket? What is on your tab? 1 steak or 3?
Guessing 1?
1, because you pay for the outcome.
Right.
With AI, you're not paying for the outcome. You're paying for the process. So if agentic AI delivers an answer that probabilistically is 80-85% correct, but it's not the answer, absolutely, i.e. the steak done correctly, it goes back into the kitchen, it pulls the ingredients down, it redoes everything, and redelivers you probabilistically what you think is next. Best answer. Maybe it's 83% correct. Maybe it's 73. I don't know. But over time, that answer becomes less and less likely. And every time you pull the trigger, every time you press the button, it goes back, it gathers context, does all this other stuff, does its process, and delivers to you. But you're paying for the process, not for the outcome. And I believe it's important that we get to a point where you're actually paying for the results, not just the process.
Yeah.
You come use us for retention search. Are you paying for process? Yeah, but by and large, the vast amount of revenue we make, and therefore what's owed to us, is based on the result that our process generates. And I think a model like that is the direction that eventually things need to go when it comes to AI and how we use it. Is a mentality of, why should I be paying for stuff that doesn't deliver? And interestingly enough, technical side note, I think there's a massive, unbelievably large opportunity, and you don't hear much about it. Everybody's agentic this and agent that and so on and so forth. There's a huge opportunity for companies to use ML, machine learning, very robustly, which is deterministic. You're going to get to the right answer. Okay, it's not probabilistic because we have the compute cycles, the memory, and everything else. So, as a side note, there's ways to work around the steakhouse example, but by and large, if you're using Claude, you're using chat, so on and so forth, you're paying for the process, not the outcome, and that gets expensive.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, John, really interesting. I just realized the time kind of got away from us here. We're at the end of our session. I did have a lot of other questions. Happy to bring you back on maybe in the future if you have time. But
Sure.
Thank you so much. And I see we have 32 people here listening live as well. So thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. All right.
Outstanding.
All right. We'll land the plane then. Just give me one second, John.
Sonny, hey, thanks so much, man. We'll do it again.
Thank you. Yeah. Hang up for 1 minute, John. I'm going to bring the stream to an end.